Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Lit Happens. If you're tuning in today with us, this is going to be part one of a four-parter of our essay text type episode that we're going to be discussing, looking at some of the key elements that your students need to effectively craft essay responses. So as always, we've got Adriel and Belle here today. Hi, Adriel.
Hello, how are we going?
We're going well, I think. Everyone's
That's
plugging
good.
along, getting into the terms, report writing season's coming along.
Mm, Lots of
um,
busy. It's a busy period, definitely.
100%. All right, well, let's get into our episode then for today, Adriel. What do you reckon?
Yes, let's get into essay writing, isn't it? Or what is
That's
an
it.
essay
Yeah.
response?
Yeah, that's it. As we did say when we opened, this is part one. So we're going to look at breaking down. Today's going to be overall essay writing, and then we'll look at doing specific segments on, an intro, the body, the conclusion, and we're also going to have a bit of a discussion today as well on the different language in terms of the bands when we're looking at
Mm,
students producing, thoughtful versus effective writing. So I think that will be a really, really valuable conversation that we can start today and then continue to address as we get through our
Yeah.
parters. But I think for today, part one, it's all about understanding the key elements of an essay that will help students to articulate their ideas with clarity and also with persuasion. We need to look at the language and the form of essay or persuasive essay writing here. So let's dive into our discussion then, Adriel. We've got a few questions just to help us highlight these essential components. And then
Yep.
I think we can talk to that with some of our own experiences and some examples as well.
Sounds good.
And also, before I forget, if you are checking this out on YouTube, thank you, first off. And
Yep.
secondly, you'll note that today we've actually got a two-page little cheat sheet
Yeah.
with some of the
Yeah.
key
You
elements
can sort of
of,
see.
thank you, Adriel. Yeah, Adriel's the master over here, getting the resource up on the video that so you can see. Thank you, Adriel. And just a bit of a cheat sheet to accompany some of the key points we're making today. It is free. You'll be able to see it through YouTube. You'll be able to find it in our show notes. And we just hope that it's, an extra little visual or guide that you can use, that you can project,
Mm.
whatever we can do to help you guys. It's really our mission, isn't it, Adriel?
Yeah, no, definitely. And Belle's been fantastic in developing these little resources here just to sort of give away to you guys. There's no costs. And it's just to help you guys, during these tough times at the moment. But we say no cost. I don't know. One thing that we would love from you guys, as we sort of mentioned before, is just a bit more exposure. So really engage with us. I think get involved with us on our socials. What would you like more of? We'll speak into this as we
Yeah.
continue to go and see what we can produce for you guys, just to help you guys out. Um, because we're here for everyone. We know that teaching is definitely going through an interesting phase at the moment, especially English teaching. We love it,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
we're really passionate to help you guys out with. So yeah, look, Bell's master at these little sheets, and we're really privileged and honored to have these.
And we'd really love to make some more for you guys. So if you tell us what topics you like, you know that you're going to score a little freebie as well.
Mm,
So
mm,
that's a nice
mm,
little sweep, that too. All right. Well, we might start with, I think, the basic thing that all teachers often begin with when they're trying to explicitly teach and model essay writing with their English students is covering what is the purpose of an essay response. What is its goal, its aim, what's it trying to achieve?
yeah, awesome, awesome. So generally, we have to look back at the form of an essay. It is a persuasive type of text, and I always go back to like this with my students. In primary school, they would have done what they called expositions, and I say they're like your foundational forms of an essay. It's presenting a one-sided argument or a point of view, and backing it up using certain points of evidence and maybe techniques they might have looked at. I don't know about you, Bill, but like when we were in primary school and we used to sit in front of the classroom there, legs crossed and whatnot, and your teachers used to have those little. Actually, I'm pretty sure I've seen them in your classroom, Bill. You had those little text type forms
Those
that you used to
charts?
post up. Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yep.
so
Thank you,
yeah,
Temu. Now,
there
back in the day, we had to make them ourselves. Now, jump on to, I mean, we're not sponsored by Temu, but I'm just
no.
saying, thank you, Temu.
100%. No, so what I'm sort of engaging with is kids have already looked at this type of or style of response through primary school all the way through into the early sort of junior years as well. And we start to look at essays as this persuasive response. Now, remember, the purpose of an essay is to convey an argument. And when we do that argument, we're going to introduce what we call a thesis statement, which we'll move into in a little bit. But this
Mhm.
is arguing a certain point of view, and giving a clear argument or analysis on the idea that is being presented. So we often say this with students: your thesis should not sit on the fence. You have to argue one point or the other. It's like a yes
Mhm.
or a no, true or false sort of thing. But we are going to step away from that. It's just to get people to think about, okay, we need a one-sided argument.
Mhm.
And generally we have to look at this thesis statement that engages with the needs of the question. I think that's where a lot of students will generally sort of fall away from.
Yeah.
So it shouldn't just respond to um, the question in a general form. Like we look back at that iceberg sort of analysis. If we look at that metaphor, um, students will often look at the iceberg and they'll look at the tip of the iceberg. They don't prepare a response that engages with all the depth that is often seen under the water. So it's probably a nice sort of way. I'll see later on. I'll probably do a little video for us on our socials. I used this little analogy with the iceberg, and students engaging with the question in a way that encourages global warming. This is the way I sort of signpost it for them, where they want to see like the sea level sort of rise there, where they only give the surface
Mhm.
level response. And
Mhm.
so,
Mhm.
well, you guys really don't care about the planet when it comes to your essay responses. I won't get too much into it here, but like, think of ways in which you can
That's a cool
engage kids with this.
analogy. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's very
think about
engaging. Mhm.
think of because this is the stuff that will signpost them later on when it's under pressure. Okay, what did my teacher say? What are some of the things engaging with these essays that allow me to actually convey a clear argument that will allow for
Yeah.
an in-depth analysis, and so on and so forth. So
Mm.
when we're looking at the thesis statement, make sure they are engaging with a main argument which they want to be conveying through the entirety of the essay. That's very, very, very significant for a persuasive response.
Mhm.
And I think
Mhm.
sort of we've mentioned this before. A good thesis statement here is the bedrock. It's the cornerstone of a good persuasive response. If
Yeah.
the thesis statement is not clear, it means
Mhm.
that your reader, your teachers, the markers at the HSC Center for our bands, our 11 and 12 students, will not understand the clear direction and will not have a good understanding of the clarity of your
Yeah.
response. It'll be all over the shop. So, yeah, going back to like that purpose of an essay, just to sort of summate it a little bit here, it is to
Mhm.
remember convey a clear argument. That's probably the big
Yeah.
thing in a deep and effective manner, whether it be through
Yeah.
analysis, critical evaluation. I think we're going to look at some of these verbs later on, whether in this episode or later in a later sort of little episode. But these are the things that we
Yeah.
really do need to consider when it comes to the purpose of an essay.
Yeah, that's right. Because the more thoughtful they're going to be in their answer and response to the question, the stronger their thesis will be and their argument will be more
Yeah,
sustained. Yeah, that's
yeah,
brilliant. Well, okay, let's get into that part now. So once we kind of sum up that overall purpose of it, you've talked a little bit about a strong thesis. What are some tips for teachers and students alike in terms of what a strong thesis statement might look like or sound like or might include or involve?
mm, mm. Okay, so there's a few things that we want to sort of consider when we're looking at like our band six. Let's say a band six response in the HSC. This is sort of
Hmm.
what we're gearing our students towards with a good thesis statement. Now, remember, a band six essay response, according to the HSC sort of NESA guidelines, is going to generally be sophisticated, it's sustained, it's insightful engagement with a question. And again, like this is outlined by NESA sort of band descriptors. Now, in keeping this in mind, we need to understand that a thesis statement needs to be perceptive, it needs to be clear, and it needs to directly address the question, and
Yeah.
making sure that we maintain that argument in a cohesive manner throughout the entirety of the essay.
Yeah.
Now, we've used some big language here for the kids in the advanced cohort. They should be understanding this. However, we still probably need to scaffold this for them.
Yes.
So how do we need to, how are we sort of looking at the language here? This is probably going to be a big sort of thing. Now, what does clarity mean, for example? So if we're looking at this as a key characteristic, and then we probably let's just move into like the next page here for our little cheat sheet here. We're going to start to look at a few key things here. One of the key characteristics for a good thesis or an effective thesis statement is that the thesis is concise and is
Hmm.
easily comprehended. So it's easily comprehensible. So if your marker or yourself as a student or a teacher are reading it and you don't understand what the purpose or what direction this essay is going to take, well, that's probably the first step that we need to sort of encourage our students with. What
Yeah.
is the argument that you are addressing here? How are you responding to the question? And once we sort of get that, like we then start to move into specificity. All right.
Hmm.
So with your thesis statement, once you've got it concise and maybe easily understandable there, the specificity means that it delineates the essay scope and key argument. So we've got a certain amount of points that are going to be key. We're just looking at these ideas because remember they've only got a finite amount of time to develop a good essay
Yeah.
if they're
Yeah.
in the essay in the exam conditions. Obviously, if they're doing a hand-in task, um, this is probably going to be a little bit more polished here. The big thing is this, though. A key thesis or an exemplary thesis here, um, it needs to address the thematic or conceptual elements of the question. I would err more towards like that conceptual element stage, so it allows for, you know,
Yeah.
an understanding of the concept on a deeper level. And a good way to sort of look at this is remember that a band six thesis statement is generally going to be precise, insightful. It's going to establish a nuanced argument that guides the essay. And also, it transcends a mere restatement of the question. I think a lot of students and teachers, like myself, have fallen
Yeah.
into this trap before where we sort of say, hey, just reword a few things in the question, and there we go, there's your thesis statement. For the
Hmm.
higher order students, we need to sort of look at this with a bit more depth and a bit more scope. So it transcends a mere restating of the question. So what the thesis statement should do, it should offer an original perspective that addresses the
Yes.
question's conceptual underpinnings. I think that's
Yeah.
very, very important there.
Hmm.
So yeah, there's a few sort of things there that we like to consider. I also think this. Now, just be mindful of this. It needs to have a little bit of flexibility as well. Okay. So it must allow for the exploration of multiple points while remaining focused. Now, don't get this confused with the writing of a discursive essay, which presents multiple perspectives in a formal manner. We'll get into that in a future sort of episode. But what the
Hmm.
flexibility, when we're looking at a flexible thesis statement, is it allows the exploration of multiple points that support your argument.
Yeah.
So it's varied, it's wide, because a lot of the time students can become so fixated with, let's say, we're looking at characterization or the development of character, and the whole essay will then just be on character, which doesn't allow for you to explore an insightful, well-rounded, uh, conceptual sort of response. And I think that's something that's quite significant. So, yeah, there's a few things here. Bell's definitely covered
Yeah.
this with our little cheat sheet here, and we'll definitely, be adding to this with our little videos and how tos as we do continue on. But remember, as teachers, we should encourage our students to develop their thesis statements after thoroughly analyzing the question.
Yeah.
It's not a one and done thing as well. It's something that
Yeah.
requires refinement during the planning stages in order to align best with the question. And also, if they're prepping this for the HSC, how can we make this adaptable as well to a
Yes.
variety of questions? I
Absolutely.
think that's quite significant. So, yeah, those are a
Yeah.
few things. I apologize, I sort of may have gone a little bit more in depth or overboard there, but
That's
I think
okay.
it's
That's
it's
fine.
quite
No,
significant
it's
for
good.
students to
Yeah.
understand this. Yeah.
Well, it
Um,
is because it's the rest of your essay is null and void if the thesis is not strong. Like
mm,
everything has to tie in. That's where we get into that point of it being sustained, right? And I've
yeah.
noticed some students like their very first sentence of their intro to be their thesis statement and
Yeah.
then qualify that a little bit. But I've also seen on the reverse students who like to start with a sort of a restate or a conceptualization of the question and then work
Yeah.
their way and finish with the thesis statement.
Finish
And
with the
I always,
thesis.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I know that I prefer that. Like, even as a high school student, I preferred to work my
Yeah.
way into the thesis. But I know a lot of students and also other English teachers I've worked with that always swear by for them starting with
Mm.
the thesis. And I think, as I always say to my guys, as long as the entire intro is set up in a way to support your thesis, regardless of if it's first and last, it will still be, I think, effective. And I think you
Yeah.
made some excellent points there about like that conceptual nature of it, because I find that's what really separates the A's and the B's.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
B's might be like trying to kind of restate the question, but the A's will actually be interpreting the question,
Mm.
and
Mm.
therefore they say something about the question. They don't just agree
Yeah.
with it per se, but they try and do something with that,
Yeah.
going in line with what their
Yeah.
interpretation of the text is. But
Yeah.
like you said, definitely in the next episode we're going to go through this in much more
Mm.
detail. But okay,
Mm.
perfect. So we understand the purpose of the essay. We've got our thesis statement. Maybe now we should talk a little bit about how teachers might support students in structuring their essay
Yeah.
responses.
Yeah.
What's the typical formula? Obviously, there are a lot of different ways we can go as well, but what seems to be a more generalized way to do that?
Mm. 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 Awesome. So when we're looking at our body paragraphs or the structure of our responses here, like we've got in our little cheat sheet, you can probably see here, it says how to structure your essay. So obviously we're going to want to make sure that our essay adheres to a logical and a cohesive structure. I think those are the two words that we need to really emphasize with our students. Now, it's going to come in the form of an introduction. We've just spoken a little bit about what the introduction includes. So it's a thesis statement. We'll go into this a little bit more in our next episode, but it should provide a little bit of a summary of what the essay is going to hold in response to your thesis. After which time, then we move to our our body paragraphs there, which includes the conclusion. Sorry, not the conclusion. our first, second, maybe third paragraph. All right, and these need to be elevated, I guess, through seamless transitions with a purposeful organization. So, what do we look at when we're looking at our introduction here? Like I just said, it needs to engage with the question, it introduces your text, the purpose, the audience context,
Mhm,
provides a clear thesis statement, and we
mhm.
then move on to the first body paragraph. Now, this is very significant. Every single body paragraph must
Yeah,
begin or have somewhere in the first few lines a clear topic sentence that supports the thesis.
yeah,
These are like your mini thesis
yeah,
arguments, and it's very
yeah.
significant.
That's a
And
great way to
typically,
look at it, like an
yeah,
umbrella approach, kind of. Yes.
yeah, 100%, 100%. And typically, like, you'll generally have about 3 to 4 body paragraphs. I work on the
Mhm,
premise of an essay being somewhere between 1,000 to 1,200 words for students as they start to
mhm,
prep for this,
mhm.
which means your body paragraphs will probably be anywhere from about 250 to 350 words in length.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah,
and so if you want like a general structure, the introduction maybe 150 to 200 words, maybe 150 or so.
yeah.
Body paragraphs
I
about
like a short,
250.
sharp, and intro. Yeah, I like a 100
Yeah,
word yeah,
yeah, something that just frames your response, and then this
yeah.
in the body paragraphs is where you sort of go into the meat. This is where you provide the meat of your response. It's about
Mhm,
250, 350 words each, depending on
mhm,
how many you use. And then your conclusion is
mhm.
again nice, short, sharp, sort of summative sort of response. But
Yeah,
in your body paragraphs, make sure you employ like your little writing structures. Now, we are people that often use the peel writing structure, which is your points, your evidence, your explanation, your link. Now, remember, kids will take this literally, so please scaffold this with your students.
yes,
Okay,
yeah.
so they'll just be like, "Oh, I've got my point. I've got my one piece of evidence, my one explanation, and then the link."
Mhm.
Whatever writing platform you use, please be sure to scaffold it with your students. So go through exemplar text with them. Get them to
Yeah,
maybe instead of having to write it down with them at first, maybe if you've had some past students, give them like a paragraph and go through, well, how have they used for me, it's like the peel structure or sometimes the pedal structure, whatever the kids are comfortable with. Um,
Hmm.
and really get them to sort of identify it, color code those responses so they can
Yeah,
see where everything like where everything is occurring. So yeah,
that's so
just
true.
yeah, and then after that, that's when you can get them to start maybe constructing these paragraphs. I find when I've often gone into, hey guys, write a body paragraph, which I have been susceptible of doing, it's not as effective as scaffolding it, laying the framework for your students, uh,
Yeah.
and then moving into like the apply your skills now, So the teacher modeling part is very, very important there.
Yeah, that's true because there's so many different acronyms and a variety of ways you can produce a body paragraph, and not
Yeah,
just between English teachers and English schools, but even across subject areas within a high school. So
yeah,
I think you want to, and a lot of schools have a very specific writing platform that is
yeah.
the school's platform that they try and encourage all the KLAs to work within. So
Mm,
if students are constantly getting mixed messages, that can be really frustrating and difficult for them too. I often try in that early kind of prelim, when we've started the prelim course, I'll go through a few of those different ones. Like I say to my class, okay, which ones do we know or do we know about or of? And I'll
yeah.
throw them up on the board and I'll kind of just let them see the pattern and how
Mm,
if it, all of them are effective as long as they've got the right features in the body.
yeah,
And when we do
yeah,
our episode on body paragraph, we're going to go through that in much more depth. But I find just the visual comparison of them all on the board. And then I'm like, so basically, what do we all need? We all need a
yeah,
topic sentence. We all need to have evidence, as in
yeah,
quotes, direct quotes. We all need to have techniques. We all need to elaborate. And then I
yeah.
find some students will prefer to stick with the school's platform, which is totally
Mm,
fine, and I can support that. But I
yeah,
sometimes have students are like, my flow of writing doesn't
yeah,
actually align with that, and then I'll encourage them to pick one that works as long as they then color code and make sure that all the things that they
yeah.
need are in
They've
there.
ticked
Yeah,
every
so there's
yeah,
that's it, because there's a lot of
yeah,
flexibility here too, but also, I mean, there's also a bit of school politics there with
yeah,
who's using
yeah,
what and what the platform is.
yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, I
We're not
think
here
you
to
can
rock the
judge.
boat. We're not
No,
here to rock the boat,
no, no,
but
no, no, no.
yeah.
Yeah, I
But
think,
yeah,
you are an expert on your class, and then you
yeah,
can also judge what's effective, and just I think we're just telling you all these things because they're all
yeah,
things that we need to consider, within
yeah,
our school context as well.
yeah. I think also like this is something that you can hook your students in with. Say, like, you've got kids like, why are we doing essay writing? Well, one of the things, and we can say this to even our fellow peers in the teaching sort of scope here, where this essay writing skill is cross KLA. If they can
Yeah,
understand how to write a good essay, it's going to be effective for them in all their subjects. And it's a way we can
totally.
engage our students. And look, if you have any friends that want to know how to write essays, say, for
That's it.
example, you've got someone in another subject who, hey, because I often have this, my kids are struggling to write essays, get them to watch these videos or listen to these podcasts. It'll be
Yeah.
fantastic for them. But yeah, there's a few things that we need to consider for body paragraphs, and I'll just quickly go through them very
Mhm.
quickly. Um, Remember, we've got our topic sentence, which links back to your thesis statements. We've got sophisticated evidence. There's a selection of sophisticated evidence. I want to use this word.
Yeah.
We'll go through these
Mhm.
verbs in another episode afterwards. We're sort of engaging with
Mhm.
these surface level for today's but this is where we
Yeah.
select precise quotations or examples that demonstrate a comprehensive textual knowledge, okay, not just a surface level textual knowledge. We want a perceptive analysis, so we want to analyze how the techniques convey meanings, especially in an English response, linking them to the question's themes, concepts, or maybe even some of the module sort of ideas, which are very, very important. We want maybe a little bit of that rubric integration as well, where we incorporate sort of module specific ideas to demonstrate an understanding, all depending on whether this is part of addressing the thesis statement and the question that is at hand. And then obviously a critical engagement as well. So if you are teaching an advanced English course, this is very, very important, but they might
Mhm.
consider alternate sort of interpretations or maybe counter arguments to showcase the depth of their thought
Yeah.
in these responses. So that's quite important there. And then we finish up with the conclusion, which is where we restate our thesis statement in the light of the evidence that we presented through the body paragraph.
Mhm.
It provides a synthesis of the key ideas or arguments that we've presented in the response. And I would often
Yeah.
get students to conclude with a statement that underscores the argument's broader implication. So, what are the consequences? What
Yeah.
are the effects?
Yeah.
And please, and this is probably a common thing that I'll see through all of the resources online that they will engage with. A conclusion must not introduce new ideas to
Yes.
the text.
Yeah.
Yeah, please don't
Yeah.
introduce new ideas. It's very, very important. So, yeah,
Yeah.
few things
The
there to get
conclusion.
us thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, that's great. And the conclusion is a nice barometer when I find that because the students have gotten through the essay and then the conclusion is just the end, there's almost like they don't have that stress or that pressure. Like they feel like,
yeah,
the weight is lifted, they've come to the end. And then I think the conclusion's a good barometer to be like, now go back and check your intro and make sure that it's all succinct. If that
yeah,
was your point, if you made that nice overall point in your conclusion, did you introduce that in some way in the intro, and did you actually represent that and follow that
yeah.
through within your body? It's a nice way to make sure that they've got that, like you were saying, cohesion, and that it's sustained as well. All right
100%.
then. Well, yeah, that was excellent. Thank you so much, Adriel. We might just talk a little bit about, we've got two more things to do, as like you said, a bit of a surface level episode. But we might talk for a few minutes about the role that evidence plays within an
Mm,
essay response. I
mm,
know that particularly, when you're in an advanced course, it's the bread and butter. Like it gets to
yeah,
a point where it's like, I don't care what you say if you do not proof it. Like it
yeah,
means nothing if you
yeah,
haven't brought it back to evidence, because
yeah,
I think that's where it's an argument, because you've
mm,
got justifiable
yeah,
direct evidence. And not only that you've got the direct quoting, but it's that you're also engaging with your language as
mm,
well.
mm,
And
yeah.
it's
Uh, uh,
definitely, I think, yeah, sorry.
yeah, no, no, keep going, keep going. Yeah, yeah, you're
I
good.
was no, I was just yeah, I was just gonna say that, what was I gonna say? No, that's what I was gonna say. When I think about the years of marking, you the way that the student moves between the bands in the
Yeah,
marking criteria is highly, highly dependent on what they're doing with their analysis and
what
how
is
they're
important.
engaging with it. It's
Yeah,
a big discriminator, isn't it?
yeah, it's massive, and it's quite significant for us to sort of understand this when we're looking at our sort of responses here. Now, evidence is fundamental, especially if we're looking at like
Yeah,
those band six essays, which we're working towards. I often use like an analogy for the students, and I'll use the courthouse analogy, which is you're either a defendant or a prosecutor, and whoever it may be. Say you're a defendant, and your lawyer or your barrister can argue all of these things, but if they don't have a clear set up case in terms of the clear direction as to why you're not guilty of committing a certain crime that is based on
mm,
evidence, what luck do you
mm,
have of the judge sort of ruling in your favor? And you can
yeah,
ask the kids. You can ask the kids this, and this is where this sort of approach with evidence and its importance plays a significant role across KLA as well. KLAs as well. Say you're doing a history essay, say you're doing like a legal studies or a business study, whatever essays that you're doing in those arts-based sort of subjects. If you are not providing evidence that is relevant,
mm,
your response is null and void, or it won't
that's right.
score the marks that is needed. So
No,
remember,
no,
this provides, yeah. So evidence provides the foundation for the persuasive argument. Okay, it's very, very
that's right.
significant because it allows a greater understanding of how well you have engaged with the textual study in particular.
Mhm.
So when we're starting to look at our evidence, remember the key words is just not whatever you've read in the introduction, whatever you've read in the conclusion of whatever text you've read, which is what students can do, or whatever Spark notes or
Yeah,
whatever other
yeah,
subjects online,
yeah,
um,
yes,
suggest as quotes. We want to
yeah.
see a clear
AI
engagement with.
even, yeah,
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
mm,
But it needs to be relevant and specific evidence. That is
yes,
very, very important. So making sure that we're encouraging our kids to choose quotations or examples that directly support the argument and reflect a deep textual familiarity. That's
yeah,
very important. I think
yeah,
also
very important.
when we're looking at evidence, it needs to be a technique focused analysis. So like the how
Ye
meaning is constructed.
yes, yeah,
So they want to be able to identify literary techniques, or structural elements or whatever it might be in the selected evidence in order to explain the role of
mhm,
that evidence in conveying meaning. So it links back
that's
to
right.
their thesis statement significantly. One of the other things is context as well. So a lot of the times for responses, your evidence needs to sort of provide a little bit of context as well. So we can look at
Yeah.
incorporating maybe historical, cultural, or thorough context to enrich the analysis as well. Um, so it's quite significant there. And then comprehensive evidence. I
Yes.
know I had this conversation with some of my 11 students the other day where they said, "So how many sort of pieces of evidence do we need to say remember for a Othello sort of critical study response?"
Mm.
And I think they were shocked, or some of them fell out of their chairs when I mentioned, you know, the number, which was quite significant. You're looking at least 15 to 20 pieces of
Mhm.
evidence that are needed. So quite significant. So they're drawing from multiple sections of the text to demonstrate a thorough understanding of the text. I think that's quite important for us to consider.
Absolutely. No, that you made some excellent points there. And it's not, and I always say to my students, it's not just having the quote or the evidence and having picked a great one. It's what you do with it, how you're actually analyzing the function and the role it's performing in supporting meaning and coming back to your thesis statement. And the more aligned all those things are, the more likely they're hitting the sophisticated and insightful verbiage of
Yeah,
that higher order criteria. No, that's
yeah,
excellent.
yeah.
Well, I think that's really helpful. And obviously, we're definitely going to have an episode where we go more deeply into evidence and give you some suggestions of like trial and error things that we've done to
Mm,
encourage that in our students. But just before we get to the end here, what are some overall? I think we can talk to all our listeners about some of these overall things that teachers can support students in doing so that the students can improve these essay writing skills, because it's definitely a process. And I find you do need to get a sense of how each student is doing, because every student that I've ever taught, even in one class of, let's say, advanced or standard, whatever it was, there are always pockets of kids that have do really well at certain things in the essay writing and have
yep,
aspects of the essay writing that they need to work with. So it does get to a point where you do need to engage with their draft so you can offer that specific feedback. But as a general, what are some things we can discuss now with our listeners? What are some general things that we can do to improve these essay writing skills
yeah.
and
Awesome.
responses?
Awesome. Awesome. So there's a few things. I apologize also if you can hear my puppy barking in the
don't,
in the
don't
audio. I think
apologize.
she's probably seen like a postman or something, and yeah, she thinks she's a guard dog. But
Yeah, so
anyway,
sweet.
let's go into this sort of question here.
Mm,
Look, some of the things that you can definitely do for our senior kids, get your kids to start looking at those, engaging with past papers. I think that's quite significant. I know the NESA
yeah.
website provides exam packs, and not just the
Mhm.
questions, but they provide like markers feedback. So really scaffold that with your students to get them looking at it. So yeah, past papers. So utilize some of the NESA samples, the questions, the past HEC questions, in order to sort of get them familiar with the language in those essay
Mhm.
sort of responses. I think that's quite significant. But as you sort of
Yeah.
just mentioned, in order to develop like that band six response or those effective essays, it needs to be a sustained practice. It's not something that they can
Yeah.
just write in one night. It's a sustained
Yeah.
practice of feedback and refinement across the entirety of those 2 years. And yeah, like I
Mhm.
said, one of the ways which we can sort of as teachers support our students going through this is engaging with some of those past papers. I think also studying those exemplar responses. I think that's very, very important. I've mentioned this already in today's little episode where we analyze
Yeah.
really effective responses. Now, some of them are
Yeah.
available again on NESA's website. I sometimes struggle with the NESA booklets at times, the ones that they provide us with. So
Mhm.
I'm sure that you guys are all fantastic teachers in your own right, and you've probably got exemplars from your past students that are far greater
Yes.
than some of those
Yes.
examples in these texts. Use those.
Yeah.
Use
Yes.
those. Show the kids. Don't just give them the responses. Don't give them portions of it. So, say for example,
Yes.
you're working on introductions. Well, print out the introduction. Obviously, ask permission from your previous students beforehand. And generally, they're pretty all right in doing this as well. But
Yeah. They're usually like, "I don't need it anymore. I don't care
yeah,
what happens to it." Yeah,
exactly right. But use them because you know what effective writing looks like as the teacher. You're
yeah.
the practitioner in the room. So analyze these sort of really good responses in order to understand things like structure, language, analytical depth.
Mhm,
Compare the
mhm.
different ranges. I mean, Google
Yeah,
Scholar also provides some really good
yeah,
essays as well, which you can look at. So there's
yeah.
heaps and heaps of good things
No,
there.
that's great because they can
I would,
project it on the board and even
yeah,
color code it in where's the thesis state and get your
yeah,
students to engage with that like as a whole class discussion and
yeah,
breakdown. What's the point of each sentence? Yeah, that's really
yeah.
helpful.
It's very important. Providing targeted sort of feedback, that's quite significant as well. So offer specific sort of guidance on thesis clarity, how they're using evidence or evidence selection, looking at like the analytical depth. So again, these are things that we need to scaffold as teachers for our students because we can say,
Yes.
hey, your response lacks analytical depth, but what does that look like? So that would be like the next thing that we really need to do. And also encourage peer review sessions. Okay, so instead of them having to come to you all the time, engage them with not for assessments. I will say this, and this is just a little bit of a word of warning here. Don't do
Mhm.
it with don't encourage too much peer review with assessment tasks because that can often lead to collusion with their
Yeah.
responses. But if you're doing in class writing tasks, this is where you
Yeah.
really do engage with the peer review stuff. So get them to foster that critical sort of self assessment, and if they can
Yeah.
see and pick out what good responses look like in other people's writing, well, they're going to see it naturally in their own responses. So that's quite
Mm,
significant there. Get them to master
mm,
the rubric. So ensure the students understand the
mhm.
module's sort of rubric, the descriptors, the terms. So, for example, if they're doing text and human experiences in the Year 12 Common Module, things like what is a human experience, anomalies, there's paradoxes, inconsistencies,
Yeah.
words like textual integrity. What does this mean? So, get them to understand that.
Mhm.
Revision is important. So, emphasize the exceptional essays are a result of a drafting process which includes multiple drafts, not just one or two. So students
Yeah.
should revise based on feedback, focusing on refining their arguments and enhancing their analysis. And then the
Mhm.
last sort of thing is enhancing the academic expression. This is probably the one that we neglect a little bit. But they need to
Yeah.
develop a sophisticated vocabulary and fluency by reading high
Yeah.
quality texts. And I sort of alluded to a little bit of Google Scholar here just a second ago. Get them to read and engage with literary sort of critiques of text or university based scholarly articles that will allow them to see what good academic expression looks like. So, these literary
Yeah.
reviews or analytical essays will help them to emulate that formal and precise language that's required of them in developing good response. So, I think
Yeah.
probably like this is probably one of those terms that we look at. It's a growth mindset is
Mm,
essential.
mhm.
So as
Mhm.
teachers, we should
Definitely.
so as teachers, we should reinforce that, in order to achieve those band 5 and 6 responses, it's attainable through dedication and, what we call like a step by step, baby step way of improving along the way. It's a journey as
Yeah.
opposed to something that happens straight away. It's not that instant
Yeah.
gratification that we all look for.
That's very true, Adriel. And I think those are really good student strategies. And I think, as well as teachers and within our faculties, there are some things that we can do as well to help set up our students along the way to
Yeah.
be able to engage in analytical responses and in producing an essay. So even in the, now everyone's going to be doing a lot of programming now to get their year 11 and 12 up to scratch. But
Mm,
even in the programming stage, if you know that your summative task is going to be an essay response, then backward map that and look at how you're teaching your text and what your teaching activities are across the term to encourage that. So put in, like you said, those little writing tasks and make them formative tasks. Like
yeah.
every 2 weeks, there could be a body paragraph on an idea. And if you know that you're doing an essay, I always think to myself, okay, so I know they've got to write an essay response. So as the teacher, what are some essays I would be expecting them
Yeah.
to do? As in, like, what kinds of things am I expecting them to say in those essays, or
Mm,
what would be appropriate responses to this essay question? And I know that we don't always know the essay question at the very start of the term, but if you know what your rubric and your topic is, you could have a mock essay question that is like the driving question for
Yeah.
the entire term's unit of work. And then
Yeah.
you know that you're, in that regard, you're scaffolding them to think critically before they
Mm.
even get to the writing stage. And then you've got, like, when I have lessons where I can say, oh, remember in week 3 and we did this, and then they go, oh yeah, and then
Yeah.
suddenly it's like they realize this isn't an isolated thing, writing an essay response.
Mm.
It's a
Mm.
summation of everything I've been doing. I know that's easier said than done because we never have time to do all the things we want to do
Yeah.
as English teachers. But if you are getting some, if you're lucky enough to get some programming time, and hopefully your schools are really supporting you in that, consider that backward mapping route and how your weekly lessons can build together as a whole to support students to not only think critically but be able to respond critically
Yeah.
as well. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. But yeah, look, it's a big journey. I think that's something that we sort of
Yes.
encourage our students, and if they
Yeah.
become successful in this, it'll be something that will benefit them across all of their subjects, especially for
Oh,
our senior
totally.
students. So yeah, like I
Totally.
was saying before, if you've got peers of yours that are in other KLAs, get them to jump on board, listen to this essay, and listen to the next few episodes of
Mhm.
Lit Happens here, because it's probably applicable to all subject areas, how to write good,
Yeah.
effective essays. So we'll see what we can
Yeah.
do to engage with everyone, and
Yeah.
engage with the cheat sheets that the wonderful Bell has provided here. It'll definitely help you out.
Thank you. Thank you. We just we were really thinking what is something that all teachers could, either new scheme teachers need a bit more information on, and where us more experienced teachers just need a bit of a refresh, or just
Mm,
something really relevant to be productive and listen to, on your way to or from school. So we really hope that today's little overview of essay writing has been really helpful. We're really grateful that you tune in to us here at Lit Happens. I know Adriel and I really appreciate it. And we just hope that these are some good insights today on essay response, overall aspects of it. And like we said, we are going to be doing more parters. So next week, tune in. We'd like to take you more deeply through introductions,
yeah,
structurally, their purpose, specifically the thesis production, because that's really at the core of what any essay response is. So if you want those fabulous insights that Adriel was giving us, particularly in terms of like the prescriptions and the band and the criterias, then we really hope you tune in with us for the next few episodes as well. Few things to take away from today. Remember that practice makes things a lot better. So constantly engaging your student in analytical thought and writing, providing opportunities, like you said, Adriel, for peer reviews, for feedback, all of those things are really, really helpful. And yeah, continue to please engage with us on socials. Comment on if there's a certain part episode or a certain topic you'd like us to cover. And just please continue to like and subscribe and download and
yeah.
share all our resources. We really appreciate it.